So I was testing out my lights, making sure they all worked, and I found I had some issues. First, neither one of the turn signals on the back worked, and I worked on them a little bit. And by the way, this video I wasn't going to make, but I found some stuff in investigating it that is extremely interesting to me anyway, and it explains why a lot of crazy things happen when things aren't right on your car. So the driver's side turn signal, all I had to do was take out the bulb and reinsert it, and it seemed to fix it. So that's working. And I'm gonna switch over to the passenger side now, and I'm going to change the turn signal to the other side. And as you can probably see, it blinks, but it blinks pretty slow. So I wasn't happy with that. Went in and then investigated that, and what I found was that the socket wasn't getting a good ground, and I figured out, great, I'll just buy a socket, and I actually bought two, and just to have a spare. They come with a yellow wire, but there's a brown wire and a black wire. There's brown and black on both sides. On the driver's side, it's yellow. On the passenger side, it's green up to the socket. So when you replace this, the end of your wire is going to be different color. But I figured once I replaced that, I was going to be good. Well, I replaced it, and the only thing that changed is when I had the bad ground that I knew in this socket, or the one I replaced actually, I noticed that it was a 2-filament bulb, and the only filament that was lighting, whether it was parking lights or turn signals, was the, I'll call it the upper, one's a little bit below the other. The upper filament was the only one that was lighting. So when I replaced that socket in the back, really didn't change the symptoms, because there's one more symptom. Well, actually there's two things I have to show you. I'm going to show you first, turn signal off, parking light on. It turns out the upper signal is the parking light, and I do have that now, both sides. You notice they're maybe a little dimmer than the turn signal lights. These are your running lights, so I'm sure that's normal. But when I replaced that socket and got the ground to be good, what happened was both filaments started working. So remember, now we had a slow blink on the passenger side, and when we have, and I'll shut the parking lights off and put the turn signal on again to show that again. But when I fixed it now, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the video, but I believe that light is a lot brighter than what it was with just the running lights on, but it's the turn signal. Now, I'm going to turn the parking lights back on. So with the parking lights on, I get, it looks like it's the bright light on the passenger side, the dim light on the driver's side, but it doesn't blink, and it doesn't seem, I haven't waited long enough for it to blink, so I don't think it's going to blink at all. So I'm going to take you to the front of the car, and explain a couple of really interesting things about how these parking light lamps and turn signals work. And I know this isn't quite the best position for the camera because of the angle it's shooting at, but I can't shoot it straight down the middle of the car because the passenger compartment would be in the way. What I've done is I've taken the light bulbs out of their sockets and I've put them up here so that they can both be seen at the same time. I don't have room to do that in the front of the car, and besides, I took them up to do my investigation. So let's go through the same sequence we went before. Turn signal on, and there you can see the light blinking on the upper right hand corner of the frame. And I'm going to shut this off and go check which filament that is. So that is the upper filament, and just like it was in the back. But I got my ohmmeter out and I started checking continuity to ground, and I had a good ground on that. Okay, but the second thing, just to show you what we showed before, is I turned the parking lights on. It's a little bit different up front. The parking lot light on the driver's side, which you can see in the bottom part of the frame over there, comes on, but the one for the passenger side does not. And here's where it gets really interesting. Or at least I thought it was going to show me something different. Okay, now it's not coming on if I turn the turn signal on the front side. I thought when I left this the other day that the light was coming on, but this is where it is right now. So we're going to leave it at that. So in investigating that, because of the fact that the turn signal was coming on, but it was blinking slowly, just like it did in the back, I got to investigating for grounds and found a wire that was loose. And I had thought when I put the body back on that it was, since it was laying over here, that it was from the aftermarket alarm system that I had taken out. So I tried to find where it was attached, and I found that it was simply taped to a wire in the front, which I might have to move the camera if I want to show you that. But it wasn't soldered, it wasn't a good connection. I'm going to move the camera just a little bit and I can peek that wire where this was connected. I had to unwrap the untape the wiring harness up there to do it. And then I found that somebody's been in here before, because this was wrapped and taped, obviously wasn't making a good connection. This end was just loose, and since it wasn't bent or anything, can't even get it in front of the camera, wasn't bent or anything, and now that I mentioned that, I'm not sure which end of this was taped, but it didn't have a real connector on it like you would have if you were putting it to a ground. If you were doing it right, you should have an eye connector there that you put a bolt through and connect it. So I knew I didn't have a good ground, but when I touched the other end of this to a ground, it really didn't change much. So I started to look at continuity between the ground and the power wires that go from the left side over here to the right where the bulb's not working now, thinking I had a break in either the ground or the power wires or a short between them. And that's where it gets really interesting. And now in putting my ohm meter on it, I would see continuity not only to the ground wire, I'd see continuity between the brown wire, and I'd also see continuity on, turns out is the green wire up, I know it's dark blue up front. I saw continuity to that, but it really got interesting when I went and checked for continuity between the ground and the brown wire, and I had it, and I checked for continuity between the ground and the blue wire, and I had that. But what really threw me is that I had continuity between the brown wire and the blue wire. The brown wire should be the parking lights, the blue wire should be the turn signal. That kind of threw me for a loop, and then I suddenly realized what was happening, and I'm going to try to draw it out because it's going to be too difficult to explain on the car, and it's easier to see in an illustration. So I'm going to draw some stuff and be back with my artwork. Okay, I don't rehearse any of these videos. I just talk as I go. And I remembered on my way to find a pen for the artwork why I decided that the front turn signal did not come on when I had the parking light and the turn signal on. And the reason I came up with is the parking light was supplying 12 volts on the brown wire. The turn signal was supplying 12 volts on the turn signal wire. And remember, when we had the turn signal on and the parking signal on, that was both powering the upper filament, I'll call it. So it was basically 12 volts running into each other each way. Therefore, no current flowed and you didn't get any light. That's why what I determined on why the right-hand side, passenger side, went off when I had both the turn signal and the parking lights on. Okay, I hope this shows up well enough to get the meaning across here, but basically I have drawn two very bad pictures of bulbs. This is the glass part, and the bottom piece of the bulb where it goes into the socket is the ground, and it's connected to a ground wire. It goes to a ground, and then there are two, I'll call them terminals, on each end, on the other end, and these dotted wires are actually solid, but I've made them dotted to show that they are inside the bulb and you can't really see them. But so you have a dark blue for the turn signal bulb, which should be the lower bulb. And these are the filaments here and here. And you have a brown wire, which goes to the upper filament and then down to the ground. And that's how they light up. So, the first thing we did was we turned on the turn signal, and that should have powered the dark blue wire, which means power goes up through the inside of the bulb, should light this filament and come down to connect to the metal part on the bulb, which goes to ground, and you complete the circuit and it lights up. When you turn on the parking lights, the brown wire should power both the upper element over here, the upper filament, which goes to the ground, the base of the socket, in other words, goes to the ground, light comes on. It also sends power over this brown wire, which should power the upper element, should go to ground, or to the base of the socket, which goes to ground. Now, that's kind of simple. What happens if this ground isn't there? And this is where it gets, where my light bulb came on, and why I think that fixing that ground is going to at least fix some of the problems. I can't guarantee that there aren't other problems, but it is a problem. So let's say that we turn on the dark blue wire, power to the dark blue wire, because we turned on the turn signal. So it goes up this filament, goes down here, can't go to ground here, but guess what? This other filament is connected to the base of this socket, so the current goes up here through this filament, across this brown wire, which goes up through this filament, which goes to the base of this socket, and boom, it goes to the ground. So, all the resistance in these two filaments, this one glows for some reason, this one doesn't glow. Maybe there's not enough voltage to power both of them. So this upper filament glows, and it blinks very slowly because the current, because of the resistance of these two filaments, isn't flowing to ground fast enough to make it blink fast. I hope that makes sense. Now, parking lights, we turned those on, and the left one came on, so the power went up through there and to ground and came on, and the power also came across this brown wire, goes up through this filament, comes down, connects to the base of the bulb, should go to ground, but this isn't here. So it would try to go back up through this ground, through the turn signal circuit, but guess what? Turn signal's not on, so this gets broken, therefore doesn't come on. And the last scenario was when you had both on. So you got 12 volts coming up through this bulb and lighting that one. Coming across this to this filament. You also have 12 volts from the turn signal coming up, going across this filament. And they meet here and they have no place to go, so you don't get a light. So I think that is the root of at least some of the problems with the turn signal, and I hope that when I review this I explained it well enough. But what I'm going to do essentially is I'm going to put a wire in, I'm going to attach it to where that one that wasn't connected, and I'm going to put it to a good known ground. I have installed those grounding blocks all over the car so that I know I can get a good ground from anywhere. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that off camera because that's just joining a couple wires, putting a terminal end on one so I can screw it to the ground, and we'll see what happens. Okay, you're going to find out when I do. I've soldered in a good ground, or at least I think it's a good ground. I'll turn the passenger side turn signal on. Still not blinking fast. That's not good. See if we got a parking light. No parking light. Okay, I've got more. That did absolutely nothing. I've got more investigating to do. Possible there's another break in that ground wire, so that's going to be the first thing I investigate. So I'll have to unwrap that entire wiring cable that goes between the left and the right side at the front. Okay, I have made some progress here. I'm going to turn on the right-hand passenger side turn signal. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn the headlights on, or parking lights. That comes on. I should go over and check that to see whether it's the opposite filaments, but what I'm going to do, I think I can check it just by flipping on the turn signal. And it works. After undoing the wiring harness and checking it out and not seeing anything there, and I wish I had thought about this sooner, but oops, let me show you something else first. Now that is parking lights on. Turn signal. But you notice what didn't happen? The light on the other side didn't come on. I'll try the turn signal light. That's not working. I'm going to turn off the parking lights. And I think I'm going to get the slow blink on the turn signal. And yes, I did. So, the problem has moved from the passenger side to the driver's side. How did that happen? Turn these lights off just because there's no point in having them on. These connectors are the same on the driver and passenger side. I just took the one from the driver's side, put it on the passenger side, and took the one from the passenger side and put it on the driver's side. Now the question is, I have tested, I think, all these terminals for continuity. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to test them for continuity from the pins in here to the pins in here, because remember I bought that second light socket? Well, if it's a light socket, I already have what I need to repair it. I just have to cut some wires and do some splicing. If it's this end that's the problem, then I'll have to do something else. Okay, I had tested this before for resistance or continuity, and right now I am connected to one of the power leads. And if I can get it on there, around about 1.9 ohms resistance. I'm going to connect it to the other power lead. Trying to show you both the connection I'm making and the meter. 1.8 ohms. I'm going to connect it to the ground. Let's get it out of the way. 68.3 ohms, 67, whatever. It's a lot more than one or two. So I know that the ground is bad or poor, not disconnected, but poor on this thing, and I'm going to try to pull this out because I think whether or not this comes out, I'm going to probably probably going to replace this socket because I have one. That makes it easy. But okay, so by tugging on that, I managed to make it not have continuity. Okay, I'm pushing on it again. I got .33 ohms. Pull on it a little bit. 1.9. So I'm thinking that this is the problem right here, this socket. So I'm going to take that new socket I already have and splice it together with the new socket on it. Apparently this side is okay, and we'll do some more continuity testing once I get that done. Okay, I'm going to start with testing the continuity on the ground wire. Hopefully we'll have a low number. Much, much better. Let's go for one of the power leads. Make sure I got those connected right. And the other power lead. Again, less than 1 ohm, so that's even better than what they tested before. I'm going to plug this in with a bulb, and we can test our turn signals. Okay, I've got that connected up again. Right-hand turn signal's working well. Oh. Still blinking slow. See what happens when we turn on the... Wow. thought I had it solved. I guess there's more investigation in my future here. I am going to check to see which filaments are burning. If I can tell here, both. It would appear that the ground wire on my new socket isn't making a good connection, because when I wiggle it, it changes what's going on there. I don't know if I can repair that with what I've got on hand. But at least it was enough of a connection that it lit the correct filament. But apparently not good enough a connection to trigger the flasher. I don't know if there's anything, it's too hot to work with now. I don't know if there's anything I can do about that with what I have on hand, so I may have to order a part. If I order a new part, I'm going to order that whole piece of the harness or whatever it is. The light bulb socket and the plug that goes into the harness. So I checked with the just the turn signal on, and the turn signal is lighting up the top filament. Now that could be one of two things. Either I've got the bulb in there wrong and it's not making a good contact with the ground because of that. That would explain everything. Or, in other words, rotated 180 degrees. Or the ground isn't good and it's going through the other filaments, like I explained before I started changing the wiring. Okay, I may have had that bulb in there wrong because I rotated it 180 degrees and it actually went in easy. That looks better. Yep, that was the problem. Didn't have the bulb in right. Those bulbs are, one of the pins is higher, and if you force them hard enough, you can get them in the back the wrong way. So that is obviously what I did. Try to turn signals without the... Okay, so that is a done deal. I am going to try to feed those bulbs in from the top while they're still connected, because it's hard to reach up under there and connect that pigtail to the wiring harness because of how it's in there. And I do have to tape up a couple things that I untaped in investigating this in that wiring harness that goes across the front of the car. But other than that, we might be good to go. And guess what? I didn't tell you this, but before I added that extra ground, the horn was not working. So I did need that extra ground. I did need that socket repaired. I did need the rear socket repaired. So there were a number of problems, but they all appear to be handled now. It's just a matter of feeding those things back through and hooking them up. I may, just for grins, I think I'm going to, I have some wire looms. I'm going to maybe put those wires on those pigtails in wire looms as well, just to make it a little neater. One final update on the turn signal situation. I put them down through and put them into the lenses, and I went and tested it one more time, and the left side, the driver's side, was working the way it did before. And by that I mean no lights with the parking lights, slow blinking with the turn signal only, and nothing with the turn signal and the parking lights. So I fiddled around with the socket that I just soldered in there, and just right at the socket. And apparently when I thought I had the bulb in wrong, I did have the bulb in wrong, I think. And in addition to that, I think there's a poor ground in that brand new socket. But the good news is that if it doesn't work well because of hitting bumps and loosening up and, not making a ground, I will know that I need one of those pigtails, and I'll just buy the whole pigtail socket and connector to the main wiring harness, as one piece, and I'll put that in, and that should cure the problem. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. I certainly did. And I hope if you have problems with turn signals, this helps you figure them out. Thanks for watching.